Hello everyone, welcome to Analog IS Current Affair Analysis for 11th March 2021. In this video, we'll be talking about this couple of issues. This article is titled A Case for Revamped Need-Based Public Distribution System or PDS. So this directly comes under GS3 syllabus of Public Distribution System, also which has implications on the GS2 syllabus, that is poverty and hunger issues and other social issues. So basically this comes under the social issues aspect of GS2 as well. Now, if you take a look at the economic survey report that was tabled in the parliament in January this year, it brought to the notice one important issue, the issue of food subsidy bill. Now, there can be a political debate about how to look at this particular scenario, whether the fact that the government is incurring a certain amount of bill on food security, should that be looked at as a liability to the government, or should that be looked at that as an investment into the social capital, or what is called as the human capital? That is the basic fundamental question that any policy maker would be facing. So if we take a look at the statistics, during 2016 to 2017 and last year, that is 2019 to 2020, if you take a look at the subsidy amount and also consider the off-budget borrowings of FCI from the National Small Savings Fund, and this goes towards food security, this is somewhere in the range of 1.65 lakh crores to 2.2 lakh crores according to Economic Survey. In order to appreciate the nuances of what this food security bill is all about, you have to understand the National Food Security Act of 2013, which ensures that 67% of the entire country's population get subsidized food grains at 2 rupees a kg for wheat and 3 rupees a kg for rice. There are subcategories, and based on each of these categories, the prices will be decided by the government. But together they have incurred a cost of 1.65 lakh crores to 2.2 lakh crores. So based on this improved version of the targeted PDS that we're talking about in the present times, the law requires that the authorities provide at least each beneficiary 5 kgs of rice or wheat per month, depending on the geography that they reside in. So the problem is political intervention in the entire issue. So there is a concept called the central issue price. We know that the government procures grains from farmers at a price called the minimum support price. Now, since government also wants to get certain amount of profit, it sells the food grains at a price called the central issue price. Now, this central issue price is the price at which government makes these food grains available to states. So the states fix retail price to be purchased at ration shops, or they are called fair price shops. So the government's responsibility in this entire public distribution system is therefore at best just operational. All the policy level matters are decided by the central government only. The problem in this entire issue is that the CIP, or the central issue price, has remained at 2 rupees per kg and 3 rupees per kg for wheat and rice respectively, and this was supposed to be revised way back in 2017 itself, but it didn't happen. So what makes the subject even more problematic is the difference in the retail issue prices of rice and wheat. So there are certain states, like say for example Karnataka as quoted in this article, and West Bengal. There is a category called Priority Households and Antyodaya Ann Yojana. So these are two different categories of the card holders or the eligible beneficiaries. So In the certain states like Tamil Nadu, rice is given completely free of cost for all categories, including the non-PHH, that is priority households. So, if you just increase the CIPs of rice and wheat without a corresponding rise in the issue prices of the state government, it would only increase the burden of states. So, that is the problem here. So, how do you ensure that this problem does not happen and there is a better price for the center as well? For this, there is a need to relook at food subsidy system. How do we ensure this is the central question being raised in this article. One study says that from the existing 67% of the population, we have to reduce it to nearly 40% of the population. Secondly, just like in the case of the gas cylinders, certain rich or people who can afford to have normal food grains should be asked to give up their ration subsidies by persuasion. Third one, so there are states which allow to frame the criteria for identification of this priority households. So the center can push the states into reducing the number of such beneficiaries. So there are certain committees which say that there are only a few vulnerable communities who cannot pay the amount that is driven by the market. So for those sections only, the government must be paying certain amount of money. All the other beneficiaries, for them, the price should be increased, is what these committees say. So therefore, there is a pressing need for revamping the entire food subsidy system to make this entire idea of equity with respect to food security for all the sections of the population a reality. Also, there is a huge scope for leakages through this system. Therefore, time is ripe for reconsidering this system and plug the leakages so that we can reduce our subsidy bill. That is the gist of this article. The second article is titled Regulation Redux. This is about a recent public interest litigation that was filed in the Supreme Court to create a national level body which is supposed to act as a environmental regulator, an umbrella body under the Environment Protection Act 1986. So Supreme Court in this particular PIL has redirected the plea to the center and asked the center's opinion to consider this request. So in this article we will be examining the merits of this PIL. In our syllabus there is a topic called environmental impact assessment. So this article can be looked at from the perspective of this item of the syllabus. So in this particular public interest litigation, there was one important issue that was raised with respect to the new norms that was released by the government through the EIA rules 2020. So in this particular case, a key issue was raised in the PIL regarding the lack of credibility of the EIA process, leading to reports that are often produced with the help of certain manipulated data. In order to appreciate the nuances of this PIL, you have to know the purpose of this environmental impact assessment. There are certain environmentally vulnerable areas which can have long lasting impacts on the people residing in those areas. In order to ensure that the voice of the people gets heard when taking these sort of decisions that impact them, environmental impact assessment has given a centrality to the role of the civil society in deciding whether a particular project is environmentally and economically viable in that area with the consent of the Grama Sabha. So people's participation is a very important role or a central aspect of this entire philosophy that goes behind environmental impact assessment. Since a majority of the rural population don't have enough credible knowledge that can appreciate the nuances involved in the processes of EIA, civil society often plays a major role in increasing the awareness of the importance of this process amongst the rural population. But the new EIA rules has sort of bypassed the role that these civil societies play, and they generally stopped the civil society from taking up an active role in these areas through the new set of rules. One of the most important um, principle that is followed in the Environmental Protection Act of 1986 is the fact that polluter will pay, and this principle or principle of environmental legislation is called the polluter pays principle. Now, this new draft EIA rules are deviating from this process. So, in the EIA 2006 notification, this philosophy of polluter pays existed, but there is a deviation in this new EIA 2020 process. This set of rules uh, allow the polluter to get away with polluting the environment, because it allows the polluter to just pay certain fines rather than stopping him from polluting the environment. Also, there is a post facto approval procedure. This post facto approval procedure means first the applicant can set up a factory and then seek a post facto approval. But probably sometimes it is quite possible that the damage is already done by the time this post facto approval comes or is rejected. This is done in the name of ease of doing business to attract more capital into hitherto unexplored areas. So this is very dangerous for environment according to various activists. Considering all these factors, it is quite clear that with the present scheme of things, even a new regulator as demanded in a PIL will not be sufficient for addressing the problems of our environment. We need clean air, water, and sustainable activities of our economies. For that to happen, we need structural shifts in our way of consumption. We need to move towards a post carbon economy, which is still a very distant dream for India, considering the fact that we did not even peak our greenhouse gas emissions. So, the question that we have to ask here is, India cannot afford to do what it is doing right now to its forests, rivers, wetlands, and air, yet we are continuing down the same line. At the same time, we also have a significant challenge in the form of our demography. We have to create enough number of jobs. Now, how do you balance between the both of these challenges? The answer lies in green economy. We have to go towards frugal living. We have to encourage as a society a structural shift towards the post carbon economy where frugal lifestyles are respected through behavioral changes. That is what this article is trying to say. So, apart from this, what we can actually do at an administrative level is create a list of lands where industry can proactively come forward and adapt those lands and change the land usage pattern in those areas. There are a lot of areas where they are considered to be wastelands. So these wastelands can be reclaimed through the usage of corporate social responsibility, that is 2% of the net profits of the last 3 years. They can be used towards these environmental projects. Even NGOs, which always played a positive role in environmental conservation, can be made active partners. So this is how we have to go towards sustainable lifestyles in the future, and not just doing away with all sorts of environmental regulations in the name of ease of doing business. That is what this article is trying to say. That is the gist of this article.